Mixing with my plugin of the week comes from Sonible. It's a Smart Comp2. Smart Comp2 is an update, obviously, to Smart Comp 1 with a whole bunch of added new features. I'm not going to go in detail out every little changed feature in between, but there's lots of new stuff in here, and it's just insane. It has a spectral compression built into it, or spectral processing built into it with over 2,000 bands. It allows you to do external sidechaining, including ducking on the spectral level. So if you sidechain a bass with a kick drum, it will take away only kick drum frequencies from the bass, things of that nature. It has this insane feature here called a freeform transfer function, which is one of my favorite new things and allows you to control not only like mid-level compression but low-level compression at the same time, as well as top-down compression. And that's really the most spectacular part of this, and the thing I'm really going to dig into perhaps the most. There's loads of things that you can do with it. As with all of the sonible compressors, one of the ideas or the essence of it is built around an artificial or AI engine where you can select a setting here, scan in the audio. I'm going to do that here just real quick. And it will come up with a set attack, release, and ratio, which you can then adjust. If you make adjustments and you decide, well, do I like this or do I prefer where I was before, you hit the little button up here that connects you right back to the settings as it called it up. So it gives you the ability to adapt and quickly A/B around it. So we have the whole section here which allows you to learn what's going on. You could store some different variations of it here in this section. You could load up presets here, undo, redo. You got some preferences here, and including turning off the tooltips, which is what I meant to do. And connect with the tutorial, etc., all of that sort of stuff. So some basic features there. We got the output section here, compression section in the middle, right? So we'll go through the detailed setup there. You could also enable the external sidechain, work in stereo or mid-side mode, which is very cool. You can monitor the delta, which allows you to hear what's changing as opposed to what you're working on. Channel link over here. In this input section here with the output section, there's also input riding, which would allow you to even out the signal as it's coming in so the compression can work more consistently. So that's something you can enable. There's a limiter on the output, which you can enable. Down here at the bottom, there's an auto gain control, which will automatically do a makeup gain based off of your compression settings. I think this primarily only works if you do the analysis. Okay, so that's one thing that shows up there. Otherwise, you could just do it manually. If you turn that off, you get a normal dB thing, and you could work that way. Down at the bottom, you get the spectral compression. So you'll see all of those settings here, and we'll go into detail on some of that. On the left-hand side here, we have a meter that shows the gain reduction. So here, the gray area is the input signal. The white line here is the compressed signal, and then it allows you to shape it from there. So we have some settings here that are connected specifically to this, and it's a feature they call the transfer function, a freeform transfer function, which allows you to set basically mid-band compression or expansion characteristics, as well as low band compression and expansion characteristics. So there's a lot to work with there. There's a reset feature, which allows you to basically reset everything back to the default settings if you just go crazy and you want to get back to normal. There's a bypass function here, which blacks out the whole screen. I never particularly like that. At least leave me so I can see a little bit of something that might be going on in the background. Whatever, no big deal. And then a style section over here. And the style section allows you to shape the way that the compression is applied, from a clean, more transparent type of process to a dirty setting, which gets far more aggressive, and you could see how that it changes the characteristic here. There's also, when you apply spectral compression, how aggressively is it applied? You could apply just none of it, a little bit of it, or you could go more exaggerating with it. So that allows you to determine how much of the spectral compression. So if you're not familiar, essentially spectral compression is something that will work across the frequency spectrum. That's the spectral part of it. So it will compress within particular frequency zones based on the content that's there. So it still will apply the same settings. It will just be applied a little bit more micromanaged throughout the sound, as a with an idea or angle on it of being able to tonally balance the sound in the process of applying the compression. So you can get a lot of tonal coloration out of this as well. And for that, there's a tonal color which allows you to lean the sound a bit darker or a bit brighter as you're working with it. So all of these features kind of work together. I'm going to get into some of the attack release characteristics and things like that. But when you're working with the spectral section, there's also a way to limit the frequency area with which the spectral processing is occurring. So you could dial it in there, and then there's a spectral link control that determines what happens with the signal outside of that spectral zone that you're working with, how much other compression gets applied to it. So this allows you to really focus the spectral compression within a particular area. Although I haven't played around with it, this might be something that you could do, for example, for de-essing or something along those lines, where you could get super detailed, bring it in within the particular range, and then capture a variety of stuff of CHs and SHs and S's and some of the differences that may occur in terms of the different frequency zones, and be very particular about what it's grabbing. So there's a lot of options here. Again, I haven't played around with that. On the otherwise, you got the ratio control, right? So you have that just right here. You could dial that in. There is an attack window here. Now, this used to be over on the left-hand side, where you would open up a tray, and it would open up the ability to shape the attack. So it's not just that you have an attack, and within this, you also have like the ability to adjust the knee, so you can make it a hard knee or a soft knee, kind of lean it in that way in terms of making the attack more aggressive. But you can also define the exact shape of the attack as it's being applied to the audio signal. Similar type of character, including a hold feature, which is sort of interesting, which you don't normally see here. But if you were to adjust these basic settings here, you could see how some of the parameters here will get changed, right? So you could shift it all within a zone, right, and shape the attack. And this is really cool for transient shaping and all of those sorts of things. Lots of fun with that. Release has the same type of thing, except for the release where you could adjust the shape. There's also a way to sync it to the tempo. Oh, you have to turn the auto off there. I'm sorry. So you could sync it to the tempo to have it be a bit more musical in terms of the way that it approaches. It pretty much always seems to follow, or most of the time when I've done the analysis here or the learning curve, it seems to come up with an auto characteristic. So the release will timing will change based on the program material. If it's faster, it'll be faster. If it's slower, more sustaining, it'll slow down and be more sustaining. That's kind of the basic idea of it. Now, the cool thing here, and one of the things that I like the most about this in terms of playing with it, and we'll get into shaping some of these things and going through all of the spectral compression features and all of that sort of stuff, is this transfer knee, or this transfer function. Because to me, this is like kind of a missing powerful tool that you don't find a lot. Okay, and when you first get into this, there's a way where you could do it just on a standard curve, where basically you have these two dots here, one that's dealing with low-level compression, right? So I can actually pull this signal up, right? So this low-level energy can kind of come up, which is very cool. Then you have a mid-band compression, and you could see how this sort of stretches from what's in here, but pulls that generally up towards the middle, or bringing this, down from the top in and around, right? So you're kind of pulling up, kind of compacting things a little bit. And this gives you a lot of ability to really shape the way the compression works, especially for aggressive forms of compression. And it's one of the really cool features is you could do demonstrations of this on all different kinds of instruments and different elements forever, but I wanted to dial something in that was perhaps a little bit more interesting. So I'll go back to here, but they give you different characteristics. And if you sort of slope this in the other direction, you could see that it starts moving stuff downward, so it starts to act more like a gate, right? And so you could start to shape things down that way. So there's some different things, like squeezing the mid-level stuff, expanding the mid-level stuff, right? Same basic idea. There's a parallel compression setting, which gets a bit more aggressive in on that. So there's loads of fun stuff to work with just on top of the compression. So you can see, like, if you're into tweaking, this is just insane what you could do with it. And one of the things I really love with it. So I've been, really digging into it. One quick thing that I just missed was the sidechain EQ. So you have a whole sidechain EQ here with a high pass, low pass, and a couple of mid bands. So you could push that to sort of make the compression work a little bit more efficiently. All right, so let's start with the basic drums. Just get a little basic, sound stamp on it so you get an idea what's going on, and we'll start to play around with the compression. All right, so there we have the basics. Now this is what it came up with just on its analysis, so let's just play with that. All right, let me make sure. Okay, there we go. I just wasn't sure if any of these settings had changed. But right, so you could see here the gain reduction, right? So we're getting about 60 dB gain reduction. You could see the signal here, so it's easy to sort of set the threshold basically where you want it. You could see what the incoming signal is in the light gray and in the white, which is your output signal. Okay, so we can, adapt or play around with that. You can see the threshold up against that. Obviously, the ratio, it gets greater as you pull down, which is kind of an interesting way of doing it, but it sort of makes sense because you're actually compacting the signal down from the top, so it's being more aggressive on the sound of the top. So we have that there. We have the knee control, which I don't think that reset, because I think that was like somewhere in here, but we'll play around with it. And I want to play around with some of the release controls here for a bit. So we have all of that, and then we have the spectral stuff that display, which is kind of going on here. We're going to dig into that a little bit too. I want to start by working with just the attack real quick. So I'll just start with the hard knee, soft knee setting. All right, so I'm going to go with the hard knee there. You could also see the gain reduction graph up here. That's going to change as we do some different things. And I wanted to show you how you could just change the shape. Now, you sort of have this idea that, when you take like a compressor and you say you set it to 40 milliseconds, that there is like 40 milliseconds of nothing going on until you get to, and then it starts compressing, right? Allowing all the signal to sort of pass through unaffected. But that's not really the way it works. When you set an attack time, what it does is that's the amount, depending upon whose definition you use. I think the old school definition is when you get to 2/3 max gain reduction, that's your official attack time. So how long it takes to 2/3 max gain reduction. I believe the way they define it here is how long you get to maximum gain reduction, which tends to be more the metric that people use in the plugin realm of things. So when we set that attack, well, then the attack is being applied over that course of 40 seconds, not that it's non-existent up until the 40 seconds. Now, every plugin design is a little bit different, but what we can do here is we can change the shape of it. So you can see here how we can make the attack a bit fuller here with this curve, and you can see how we sharpen it here with the lower curve. So I'm changing this to 10 milliseconds, just shorting it just to get a little bit more detail. Now, if you wanted to have this sort of delayed thing, if that's what you thought attack time was, you could actually do this by pulling this out and allowing some of the signal to sort of pass through unaffected. That's a hold feature. Right, so you get the beauty of the trigger, but it actually delaying right before you get to it. And you never see a hold feature, hardly ever see a hold feature on the release, never mind on the attack. So it's sort of a great, sort of very quiet little addition there, which is quite cool, right? But let's see. I'm going to leave the hold at 0 here, but I like that basic shape here, the way, allowing it to be aggressive, but just full enough, not just clipped away. Okay, so we have that with 10 milliseconds. Let's play around with the release. So we can leave both of these up at the same time. Now, this has the auto release characteristic here, right? And you can see the gain reduction sort of flashing in blue there with the auto, right? So it'll show you kind of what the gain reduction will be. Now, when you see on the opaque area, right? So where it's colored green there in the spectral zone, is the area where the compression over which is being applied, right? So the more solid that is, the more the compression is being applied in that zone. If it's just a black background, then there's no compression being applied in that area. And so when you see the audio signal passing through, you see that graphic as well. So if you really pay attention to the details of the graphic, there's really an incredible amount of information you can really draw from it. One of the things, so if we take this off, right, we can go to tempo sync. Now this is something that I'm not sure if this is a bug because it shows something in beats here, and when I adjust it, I guess, I don't know if I can type in like a beat. Oh, I think I hit something. So I'm not figuring this out, and no setting here seems to really change that, whatever that setting is. And so I'm not clear on how that works or if that's a bug or something, but I wasn't really noticing that. So I'm going to lay off of the tempo sync thing here because I'm not sure what that is. There is a hold feature. Again, don't really see it, but if you're using this function as a gate, that becomes relevant, particularly relevant. But let's start with a longer release time. Likewise, I can shift the sync here, right? So if I wanted some hold, I could lift it there. You can see that brings up the hold. I can adjust the shape. You see how much control you have over the shape. Now this is sort of a characteristic that different vintage components would give you, where one would give you more of a longer arc in terms of the release, so it feels a bit more sustaining and drops off more quickly. And then the other is one where you would get it would feel like it dips more quickly but resolves or finishes off more slowly. And different types of vintage compressors will give you those different types of characteristics, which is part of the sound. So this idea that the release is sort of linear, it's a little bit more of a digital characteristic kind of thing, or an idealized sort of thing. I ended up like pretty close to linear here, but that shape really allows you to control the sound in a way that is, not so obvious and easy, but when you listen to it, especially with vintage compressors, you hear those things, but you don't get any kind of graphic to show you exactly what's going on. So this is really cool. I really love this. You can really tweak this, type of thing in forever. I'm going to leave it here. Let's kind of move on to some of the other things here. One is just the transfer function. So let's talk about a little bit of the midband stuff. And you could see how it's bringing up that mid-band stuff between here and here, which is the low-level stuff. Now, of course, it's being aggressive, or I'm being aggressive with it, but you could hear the effect of it if I really want to get super aggressive with it. Here, let me go back here to a standard thing. You get the basic idea, like, of how you can really shape things. So either one, if you pull it this way, can act like a gate, which shuts off the sound, and you can see it drawing things down. Or if you push it this way, it's pulling up, but it's also pulling down the output here. So one of the things that's occurring here is that as I'm bringing this up, the auto gain is also, bringing the overall gain down, because in totality, even though it doesn't sound, we're losing a lot of the dynamic. We're basically top-down compressing things. But it offers a lot of control. There are not a lot of compressors that perform that function, that upward compression function, where things below a threshold fit in, and even fewer that do real mid-level compression, that sustain energy, that really sort of averages and kind of pulls things together. That is an incredible way of really bringing out the detail and different sounds in a mix that feel a little transparent or sort of hollow, lack a bit of density and focus in the imaging. And that's something that you can really play with and draw out a ton of extra stuff from that you wouldn't expect. All right, so let's see if we can get this balanced out here. Now, within this, if we dig into the spectral side of things here, we can change the quality of compression. So although this is aggressive, and I backed up on the ratio just so I could, kind of detail this a little bit better, I can go from a clean setting to a dirty setting. And I think this can add a bit of gain here. So just watch it a little bit here, and I'll try to balance it off so the auto doesn't catch everything here. this will have the effect of kind of tightening it up. Depending upon the compression, the way you apply it, sometimes that dirty sounds really amazing. Not dirty so much in the distortion effect, but with the aggressiveness of the processing. And you could hear some of that as I'm diving in, because I'm doing a little bit of gating or a little bit of ducking in that middle sustain area, just to kind of open things up a bit and bringing up the low level energy, which is bringing out some of the ambient stuff, and this is kind of toning that back a little bit. Now with the spectral compression, I can lean it to be a bit brighter or darker, so I can make the processing or compression work a bit more, or lean it more in one zone or the other. And I can mix in the amount of spectral processing that I have here. Now, the interesting thing here with this is that I can focus the compression to within a particular zone here, right? So if I wanted to focus the spectral compression just on the low end, I could do this. And then here, what happens is the rest of the signal is still getting compressed if I have the spectral link set to 0. So I have spectral processing within this zone, but just normal full band processing within the remaining zone. But I could eliminate that altogether by switching this in the opposite direction. Which leaves the rest of it unprocessed. So again, this could be the type of feature that if you were trying to de-ess or really focus within a particular range, like maybe you're trying to get some of the clicky attackiness of an acoustic guitar out, you could focus the spectral processing within that zone or range where things are happening, put the spectral rank up to 100, and then it will be applying no processing whatsoever on the rest of the frequency spectrum and keep it sort of in that zone. Similar type of thing with S's. Other clicky poppy type of things, or different sounds like a bass, where you got a little bit of clicking with the fingering or the string buzzing off the fretboard, that type of thing. So there's just loads of stuff when you really dig into it that in terms of ways to really shape the sound. And you could just sort of go on and on. I think you could really get a sense for just the possibilities just with this simple one example. But I think if you dive in and start playing around with that feature, and particularly the transfer function feature, the spectral processing, and, the sort of everything else is going on, there's just like an infinite realm of possibilities in terms of what you can do with it. It's a very cool one. Great update. Lots of new features. Love the graphic user interface update, and I think this certainly brings it up to their latest processors. So Sonible, really love them. One of my favorite companies, and I really like this update here as well. So they're doing great work. Support them. If you dig this, go ahead and buy it. It's a great unit. You could see just the flexibility and amount of things that you could do. Not even getting into the parallel stuff, which would be really crazy when you start to go to some of the insane settings and just sort of mix it in parallel. Beautiful stuff. There you have it. Plugin of the week from Sonible, Smart Comp 2.